Okay, so now we're moving on to two-step equations. As you see in this title, we're going to have two steps in order to solve an equation. And you'll use what you learned in one-step equations. It's just linking the two together in order to solve a more complicated equation. Okay, now one thing I want you to think of is the word GEMA. Okay, now we use GEMA, it's an acronym to solve or to simplify expressions. We use GEMA when simplifying expressions, but we use AMEG, or GEMA spelled backwards, to solve equations. Okay, so let's talk about the two steps when solving an equation. So we're going backwards in GEMA, so the first step would be to add, which means you add the opposite of the addend, so you work with the addend first. The second step will be to multiply by the reciprocal of the coefficient. And that's it. So let's write those two steps down. So steps to solve a two-step equation are 1. Add the opposite of the addend to both sides of the equation. And 2, multiply by reciprocal to both sides of the equation. Okay, so if you notice, this is A, M. The next step, which we aren't going to do yet, this is a little bit more advanced than we will get to. We do exponents and then grouping symbols last, okay? But we aren't doing that for now. We're just doing basic two-step equations. So make sure this is all in your notes. And let's move on to a couple example problems. So let's see, let's do 2w plus 1 equals 5. If we have this equation, 2w plus 1 equals 5. Okay, you notice here we have a variable. The variable is w, the addend is 1, and the coefficient is 2. Now my first step is to add the opposite of the addend to both sides of the equation. Okay, I know my addend is 1, so I'm going to add the opposite of 1 to both sides of the equation. Okay, if you remember, 1 plus negative 1 is 0. That's the inverse property. When we add negative 1 to both sides of the equation, that's the equality property. Now I'm going to do it the long way first, and I'll show you the way that I expect to see it on your test in the future. So 1 plus negative 1 is 0. 5 plus negative 1 is 4. And we didn't mess around with the 2w, so we're just going to bring the 2w down. Now 2w plus 0 equals 4. This is the same as 2w equals 4. Okay, we've done the first step. The next step is to multiply by the reciprocal of the coefficient. My coefficient is 2, so let's multiply by its reciprocal, 1 over 2. And we end up with, okay, well, 1/2 of 2 is 1. We use the inverse property of multiplication in order to make the coefficient equal to 1. And then 1/2 of 4 is equal to 2. So we're left with 1w equals 2. Now, I also know that 1w is equivalent to a w. Awesome. Okay, so pause the video. Make sure to write this down. And the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to talk about what properties we used, okay? I'm back. Okay, so now let's talk about this property. Write this down. This is your inverse property of addition, okay? Inverse property of addition, and this is your inverse property of multiplication. So I'll do yellow equals inverse. Okay, and let's do this right here in green. We add negative 1 to both sides of the equation, and we multiply by 1/2 to both sides of the equation. This, as you probably could have guessed, is your equality property. Woohoo! Equality property. Okay, and I'm just going to start with the last ones. 1 times w equals w. This is your identity property. Okay, and let's see. 2w plus 0 equals 2w. Whoopsies. This is your also an identity property. Okay, let's take some more notes. Let's do just some more examples. Let's suppose we had an equation like a over 2 plus 3 equals 6. Okay, so if I notice here, we have an addend of 3 and our coefficient is 1/2. Remember we talked about that when solving one sub-equations that included a coefficient. Okay, so you can change it if you want to 1/2 a equals plus 3 equals 6, or you can do it another way. I'm gonna go ahead and change it to 1/2 of a plus 3 equals 6, although you could have just kept it as a over 2 plus 3 equals 6. I'll solve it both ways. This way I'm going to do the condensed version of how to solve this and how to show your steps when solving. Now my first step is to add the opposite of the addend. My addend is 3, so I'm going to add negative 3 to both sides of the equation. 3 plus negative 3 is equal to 0. So to this, in terms, it really just removes itself. And we're left with half of a is equal to 3. Okay, next step, multiply by the reciprocal of the coefficient. And we're left with a is equal to 6. Yay! Okay, you could have also just started from here. You'd say the addend is equal to 3, so let's add the opposite of the addend. We're left with a over 2 equals 3. Then you multiply by the reciprocal. Again, it's 2 over 1. And a is equal to 6. Okay, I'm going to leave you guys with one problem to do on your own. This is your Mathlete Shot-worthy problem. This one's a little bit trickier, okay? If you can spot where it's tricky, let me know tomorrow. So this is your Mathlete Shot-worthy question. Okay, and here it is. I want you to solve this equation. We have 2y minus 2 equals negative 3 plus 7. Okay, so I want you to solve. Okay, I also want you to identify the coefficient. The variable. And the addends. Okay, so you'll earn one Mathlete shot for solving correctly and another Mathlete shot for identifying all 3 of these correctly. So you have the potential of earning 2 Mathlete shots for this. All right, thank you for watching. This is the first time I used my Smart Document camera, so I hope that everything went well. Give me some feedback. All right, au revoir.